It is so uncommon to find reason and sentiment with noble and delicate affections in a man whom nature, as it were, could not make up, and who in size has the appearance of a child. Persuaded nobody would even take the trouble to cast an eye upon these memoirs, I began to commit to paper some of the principal events of my life, by way of memorandums for my own use, only to be reminded of the different situations I had been in, to recall to my memory scenes too interesting, emotions too strong to die in oblivion. The reflections which I shall make can be interesting only to those who delight in following nature through all her varieties, and who consequently may be curious to see a being like me assimilate himself to creatures of a common size. Those, however, would be much mistaken who would imagine that, seduced by the repeated kindness bestowed on me, or wholly devoted to the pleasures afforded me, I did not sometimes labour under painful feelings, or that I could always be unconscious of being, upon the whole, only looked upon by others as a doll, a little more perfect, it is true, and better organised than they commonly are, but, however, only as an animated toy. It was easy to judge from the very instant of my birth that I should be extremely short, being at the time I was only 8 inches. Yet, notwithstanding this diminutive proportion, I was neither weak nor puny. On the contrary, I walked and was able to speak at about the same age common to other infants, and my growth was progressively as follows. At 1 year, I was 1 foot 1 inch. At 10, 2 foot, and at 30, 3 foot 3. This is the size at which I remained fixed, by which the assertion of some naturalists proved false that dwarves grow during all their lifetime. I had scarcely entered my 9th year when my father died, and left my mother with 6 children, a circumstance to which I am indebted for the part I have since acted in the world. Had he not died, I undoubtedly should have lived obscure and unknown in a province in Russian Poland, and perhaps I would have been happier. Europe is the second smallest continent in the world, just ahead of Australia, but has had an outsized impact on the Earth, for better or worse. My recommendation this week on CuriosityStream is the fantastic, in-depth documentary The Story of Europe, which takes you on a journey from distant Rome to the precarious alliances of the present day. And that's just one of CuriosityStream's thousands of documentaries to choose from. It's like a huge Netflix for factual content. This video has been sponsored by CuriosityStream, and it's a bargain with packages as low as $5 a month, with a wide range of exclusive documentaries, with new shows popping up every week. And it's super easy to use. You can watch them on your phone, TV, or laptop. So head over to curiositystream.com/voices of the past, or scan the QR code for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and non-fiction series. And for our fans, use promo code Voices of the Past and you'll save 25% off. Thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting educational content on YouTube. A friend of my mother, the Countess Humieka, showed me much affection, and often had solicited my parents to commit my education to her care. My mother consented, not without tears, to part with me, and the Countess took me to her estate. The Countess Humieka seemed overjoyed at my consent. "I'm very glad," said she, "my dear Juju," for so they called me, "to see you have no reluctance to come and live with me." After some days of very fatiguing travel, we reached Vienna, where the report of our arrival was no sooner spread than we were visited and entertained with utmost eagerness. Soon after, we had the honour to be presented to Her Imperial Majesty, the Queen of Hungary, who graciously said that I exceeded by far all that she had heard, that I was one of the most astonishing things she'd ever seen. The Empress, near whom I stood, asked me how the King of Prussia was looked upon in Poland, and what idea I entertained of that prince. "Madam," I answered, "I have not the honour to know him, but were I in his place, instead of losing my time in waging a useless war against you, I would come to Vienna and pay my respects to you." deeming it 1,000 times more glorious to gain your esteem and friendship than to obtain the most complete victories over your troops. Her Imperial Majesty seemed much pleased at my reply and hugged me in her arms. Another time I had performed a Polish dance in her presence, and she took me on her lap, and after having much caressed me, she wished to know what I found at Vienna most curious and interesting. I answered I had seen there many things worthy of a traveller's admiration, but nothing seemed to me so extraordinary as what I beheld at that very moment. "And what is it?" said Her Majesty. "It is," I replied, "to see so little a man on the lap of so great a woman." This answer gained me new caresses. I should be guilty of ingratitude were I silent on the kindness of His Excellency the Prince Kaunitz. This great man, who at the time was ruling, as he still does, all the affairs of the German Empire, yet could still find time to spend on small objects. And I may say that the marks of friendship and interest he honoured me with would have raised many jealousies had not my size and mode of existence put me out of the common line. He called me his little friend, pretending that my conversation both amused and interested him. Though I do remember, among other things, that one day in the apartment of my benefactors, when sitting in a corner at a little distance and apparently paying no attention to the conversation, I heard they were speaking of me. One of the company having put the question whether dwarves possess the faculty of procreating. Another advanced that if they have it, their children would grow to the common size. She added that she had often revolved in her own mind how pleasant it would be to join these two little creatures, that the result might decide the question. I spare my readers the particulars of that conversation, which was carried very far, and only interrupted by my weeping bitterly. I thought I had to conclude not only that they believed themselves entitled to dispose of me without my advice, but even looked upon me as being merely physical, without morality, on whom they might try experiments of every kind. Somebody in the company, perceiving my grief, wished to know the cause of it, which I persisted in concealing at length. Arriving at Munich, we were most graciously welcomed by His Electoral Highness, and it seemed I excited no less curiosity there than in Vienna. We left that place to repair to Luneville, where Stanislav Leszczynski, the titular King of Poland, held his court. With this prince lived the famous Bebe, till then considered as the most extraordinary dwarf that ever was seen, who was indeed of a perfectly proportioned shape, with very pleasing features, but who, I am sorry to say it for the honour of our species, had, both in his mind and way of thinking, all the defects commonly attributed to us. He was at that time about 30, his height 2 feet 8 inches, and when measured, it appeared that I was much shorter, being no more than 2 foot 4 inches at the time. At our first meeting, he showed much fondness and friendship towards me, but when he perceived that I preferred the company and conversation of sensible people to his own, and above all, when he saw that the king took pleasure in my company, he conceived against me the most violent jealousy and hatred. One day we were both in the apartment of His Majesty. This prince, having much caressed me and asked several questions to which I gave satisfactory answers, seemed pleased with my replies, and testified his pleasure, then addressing Bebe, saying to him, "You see, Bebe, what a difference there is between Juju and you. He is amiable, cheerful, entertaining, and full of knowledge, whereas you are but a little machine." At these words, I saw fury sparkle in his eyes. He answered nothing, but his countenance and blush proved enough that he was violently agitated. A moment after, the king being gone to his closet, Bebe availed himself of that instant to execute his revengeful project, and slyly approaching, seized me by the waist and endeavoured to push me into the fire. Luckily, I laid hold with both hands on an iron hook, and thus I prevented this wicked design. The noise I made in defending myself brought back the king, who came to my assistance and saved me from that imminent danger. He afterwards called for his servants, put Bebe into their hands, and bade them inflict on him a corporal punishment, and ordered him never to appear in his presence any more. In vain did I intercede on behalf of the unhappy Bebe, but I could not save him the first part of his sentence, and as for the other, His Majesty did consent to revoke it upon condition he should beg my pardon. Bebe, with much reluctance, submitted to this humiliation. He fell sick a short time after, and died. Everybody attributed his death to the jealousy. I sincerely pitied him, and would not have related this circumstance but to remark that the smallness of our stature does not prevent us from experiencing the power of the passions. My return to my native country made much noise. I had not yet been seen in the capital, but was preceded by the reputation I had acquired in my travels. Besides, I had improved during my stay in foreign countries, and as Paris had given me somewhat of the easy politeness which graces manners, I was happy to perceive that many persons, by whom first I was looked upon only as an object of mere curiosity, sought my company because they took pleasure in my conversation. Emboldened by this notice and willing to enlarge the circle of my acquaintance, I cultivated friendships with several young gentlemen of my age. And women, in my eyes, had taken quite a new form. They excited my admiration, my sensibility, my desires. It was sufficient to be a woman. I was fond of the sex without choice or distinction. I loved them all. In a word, at the age of 25, I was like the other young lads at 15. These emotions, quite new to me, had their charms, and perhaps I had been happier if I could have been contented with experiencing them without seeking how to gratify desires. Unhappily, such a resistance is not in the nature of man. Pressed by the warmth of my constitution, I wished to fix my views upon a particular object. How much was my mind mortified on reflecting upon my stature, which I considered as an insurmountable object to the happiness I longed for. The most reserved women take me upon their lap, they embrace me, they bestow upon me the most tender caresses, they use me like only a child. How can I hazard, in such circumstances, a declaration at which they will only laugh, whilst I shall remain covered with eternal ridicule? The farther I was from having the common size of other men, the more lively I wished that difference might be forgotten, and that I might be treated like them. But experience has taught me that I thought as a child. I was ignorant of the effect such wonderful things may produce. Above all, I knew not, forgive me, how far women might be led by curiosity. There was then at Warsaw, among the French comedians, an actress, highly distinguished for her talents. A certain mixture of tenderness and vivacity rendered her infinitely interesting, and though not regularly handsome, she possessed all that was requisite to please and seduce. I always saw her with pleasure, and openly preferred her to all others. One night, when she had made me a most particular impression, on going out of the playhouse I met with one of my friends, who confessed that he was going to sup a little at precisely her address. "Ah!" I exclaimed with emotion. "Are you acquainted with her?" "So may you be," answered my giddy young friend. "I will introduce you to her, and you may be sure to be well received." This offer I accepted with transport, and the very next day I was introduced and welcomed in a manner equal to that I had been made to hope. This visit passed away merrily, and when I retired, she most earnestly invited me often to repeat it. But our dalliance did not last long. I was sincere in my attachment, and imagining myself beloved, she made me happy. Therefore, how great must be my astonishment when one day, on meeting by chance the very same young man who had introduced me to her, I was told that my little intrigue was known to everybody and spoken of publicly, that they bantered my discretion, and she, whom I thought the most interested in secrecy, did not mind to openly laugh at my passion and eagerness, at the tumultuous emotions she had excited in me, that she even gloried in it. This discovery sunk me down and humbled my pride. I thought I loved sincerely, I had hoped to be sincerely beloved, and it was not without extreme grief I saw the veil fall, and my illusion dispelled. However, I am now entering into the particulars of events which I shall always regard as the most interesting epoch of my life. The bounty of my benefactor, the Countess, seemed likely forever to secure me from want. I did not foresee the probability of ever being deprived of her friendship. I was caressed, fondled, and cherished. But I knew not my own heart, and all those fine expectations vanished from the moment I beheld a young female whom my benefactress had taken into her house. Such as I have described was the young Isolina's beauty, which struck me at first sight and subdued my heart. But if the impression of the moment was deep and indelible, conceive what new force must have been given to my feelings when, by living in the same house, I had daily opportunities of seeing her and of enjoying the pleasure of her lively conversation. I perceived in her all the symptoms of mutual affection, and, proud of the love with which I was conscious she regarded me, I determined not to give up in my enterprise. But these raptures were soon interrupted by the Countess. She was fully informed of and saw with concern my affection for Isolina. She became furious and, setting me at liberty, declared I had only to choose either to renounce my love for Isolina or to quit her house immediately. I preferred the latter alternative. It is true that I sacrificed to this marriage the happiness, ease, and tranquility I had before. It has been to me the source of 1,000 worries, respecting the subsistence of Isolina and myself for the future. Yet the enjoyment that I have derived from it has taught me nothing in this world is preferable to the satisfaction of pouring our distresses and our fears into the bosom of a friend so true, so dear, and so closely united, whose tender and feeling soul relieves our pains by sharing them. I should have been happy in my new state if it had been possible to solely mind the present without casting an eye on the future and mine and Isolina's maintenance. It was needful to take some step, but the choice was so much the more difficult as, having received no other education but such as was analogous to my size, and the station which the extreme bounty of the Countess seemed to have ascribed to me, I possessed at most a few agreeable talents, which would not offer me any resource. In this perplexity, my protectors were the first who suggested to me the idea of a second journey. The Prince Chamberlain especially seconded this project. He intimated to me that, having been kindly received in the principal courts of Europe years before, they would see me again with the same pleasure, and on knowing that I was a father, create interest, and in a decent manner procure me the means of leading, at my return, a peaceful and tranquil life. Seduced by such a dazzling prospect, I entirely gave myself up to this idea. I resolved to leave Vienna, being supplied with letters of recommendation to many princes of Germany and to the courts of other kingdoms. Amongst other places which I at this time visited was Astrakhan, the principal city of Asiatic Russia, which is situated at the mouth of the Volga. Accordingly, being provided with letters of recommendation, I set out for Kazan, also a great city. Perceiving that the place afforded me the prospect of a good benefit, I began to employ my time in arranging the preparation for a concert. My concert, favoured with the patronage of such great and generous personages, more than answered my most sanguine expectations. I then felt a desire to visit the desolate country of Nova Zembia. Mr. Veldefrieds did not approve of this voyage and gave me to understand that no concert could be given there. But finding me quite determined, and having some business there himself, he kindly offered to take charge of me. We sailed together over the White Sea and landed safely at Nova Zembia. I afterwards regretted that I had not listened to the advice of my friend Mr. Veldefrieds. as I found it was vain to expect any kind of benefit and perceived no objects that could gratify the eye of a traveller. The whole country presented the appearance of desolation and distress, for which, however, we ought not to blame nature, which is always perfect in her operations. But here, her noble principles had been quite destroyed, and this unfortunate corner of the globe presented the most dismal appearance. The natives are chiefly savages, and, as might naturally be expected, rude as their native climate. Their size is in general diminutive, and their strength may be easily managed. The following circumstance introduced me to their acquaintance. It happened that we were travelling in a sledge to visit some mountains of a prodigious height which seem to hang in the air and cannot be looked upon without horror, and which are inhabited by beasts of a monumental size. At this time, the savages were hunting these animals for the sake of their skins, with which, as they have no money in that country, they pay their taxes to the Emperor of Russia. I was spotted by some of them, who approached and viewed me with such looks of surprise that I doubt not I became the principal topic of their conversation. The third day after this, they surrounded our house in great numbers, and dispatched a messenger to inform us that if I did not come out and see them, they would pull down the whole house. In order to prevent the mischief these savages intended me, I made my appearance before them. I was probably indebted for my safety to the smallness of my size. As soon as their astonishment had ceased, I observed that they assumed a singular posture and lifted up their hands and eyes to the sky as if in worship of the sun. My curiosity induced me to ask the reason of this behaviour. They answered me with great calmness that they were giving thanks to the sun for allowing them to find such a man as me, as they had seen many people of various sizes, but never beheld anything like mine. I at the same time proceeded, for their amusement, to play some tunes on my guitar, with which they were highly delighted, having never before seen or heard that instrument. I pleased them so much that I think I may flatter myself and say that I won their hearts. Savages as they were, a heart atoned for many defects. I've already observed that His Excellency Sir Robert Murray Keith had prevailed upon me to visit England, by having assured me 1,000 times that I could not fail of making a brilliant fortune in a country where generosity and greatness of soul are reckoned among the most characteristic virtues of the nation. As I possessed letters of recommendation to several of the first nobility in the kingdom, no time was to be lost in making my application, particularly to their graces the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. The Duchess of Devonshire and her whole family took the most lively interest in all that concerned me, conscious that my situation was beneath my birth, education, and sentiments. She kindly recommended me to all her acquaintances, in the number of whom I must distinguish the Countess of Egremont, who, being informed that mention had been made of me at court, stuffed one of my shoes with cotton and sent it to the Queen. This excited their curiosity, and their Majesties condescended to appoint a day for me to wait on them. The King and all the royal family were present. His Majesty desired me to sit down and put several questions to me. The conversation was often interrupted by the witty and agreeable sallies of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. I had the honour of remaining 4 hours with their Majesties, who, I flatter myself, were pleased with my efforts to entertain them. These efforts were, however, nearly fatal to me, for I returned with a fever, and the very next day I was dangerously ill. Various rumours were at that time circulated respecting my visit to court, and it was mentioned in some newspapers that I had received a considerable sum of money from their Majesties. These reports were, as usual, founded on conjecture only, for had they the least foundation in truth, I would not have omitted to mention the particulars, as I consider it my duty to declare all the favours I have been indulged with. The fact is that His Majesty vouchsafed to treat me as a Polish gentleman. Sir Keith had given me many letters for his friends in England and assured me 1,000 times that I could not fail to make a splendid fortune here, so positive were his feelings for the country. But he never declared to me that I must exhibit myself. I was advised to give a concert and afterwards I was prevailed upon to make an exhibition of myself. The pressure of want and hope of success overcame all those emotions in my heart and made the expedient seem so shocking. Now that I was left to my solitary reflections on the pilgrimage in which I was engaged, so severely did I feel the disappointments I had experienced that I could not help thinking it was well that Providence had blessed me with such a firm determination to act like an upright man, as the world afforded so strong an inducement to travellers, like myself, to better their circumstances by acting like a knave. In the midst of these conflicting thoughts and mournful reflections, a black cat made his appearance by entering my room. This interruption to my reverie gave me a new turn of thinking. I couldn't help admiring the confidence of this creature in putting his trust in me. I had no objection to appoint him curate of my parish, and by so doing, he became my constant visitor. About this time, a lady of rank honoured me with a visit, who immediately perceived the black cat sitting on the sofa. She strongly expressed her admiration of this natural beauty, and touching him with a hand as white as snow, made him proudly stretch himself with joy. In this position, he appeared 2 feet long, and proportionally fat as he enjoyed good living. In fact, she was delighted with him beyond measure, and promised to procure me a number of customers to see him. She kept her word, and in a few days I found my room rather too small to contain so numerous a company. Amongst this crowd of amateurs, I met with a gentleman who was closely inquisitive about the place of his birth, and although I possessed no information at this point, I yet conferred on him the honour of being a native of Prussia, born at Berlin and son of the favourite cat of Frederick the Great. I found this rod and artificial fly catch fish from the deepest rivers. His reputation soon spread. He derived an additional lustre from noble origin, and rapidly became a favourite of the whole town. This favourable circumstance suggested to me a new project, and I wished to seize the moment of this enthusiasm and rapture of the public and give him some lessons in tricks. For, said I, when I consider the natural sharpness of such animals and their docileness when young, I may expect that, with such advantages, he will become as celebrated as the learned pig, so much admired in England. But however well digested this plan might have been, I could not arrive at such a degree of perfection in it as to procure any solution to my situation, for my pupil was found to be of a voracious disposition. With a treacherous and ambitious design of improving his manner of living, he slyly insinuated himself into the room where some canary birds were kept, and committed murder with such a cruel mind and premeditated barbarity that it was almost impossible to find any remains of them. The cat, being found guilty of this heinous crime, had sentence passed on him by his own master to be hanged. I gave my first concert by the advice of their graces the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. Had the enthusiasm continued, some concerts given now and then would have placed me above want. This, however, was not the case, for having attempted to give another a few weeks after in the same place, the receipts scarcely cleared my expenses. However gloomy may be the general aspect of winter, the sun sometimes smiles in spite of the season, resistless in the power of his brightness, the least ray of which will melt the frozen snow. Equally cheering to me, in this winter of my fate, was the appearance of the Misses Metcalfe, whose names I am forbid to mention. They did not approve of me giving a concert, much less of my making an exhibition of myself. Their noble souls, replete with elevated sentiments, looked upon my exhibition with disdain, and I was therefore compelled to try some other plan. I determined to renew my concerts, the profits of which afforded me a temporary relief. After many years travelling England and Ireland, I now draw near to the conclusion of my wandering life, being arrived in that period in which I quitted the busy stage, where I had performed in part so many tragic and comic scenes, and retired to the quiet enjoyment away from its cares and perplexities, which had been the object of my wishes from my earliest days. It was in the happy land of England that I found this blessing.